Hello, welcome to the May 25th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is okay. Bear with me just for a second. All right, sounds like everything is coming through fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, or you could simply ask questions in the chat field, and we'll try to go through these chronologically. So if you want to ask your question, you could type it in the chat field as we ask questions. If we want, the ability for people to ask questions, I'll try to go through each one chronologically. If you don't get an immediate response, it could be that we will catch up. So if we could try to avoid asking the same questions repeatedly over and over again, that would be appreciated. Also, when asking questions, if you have the capability to say, I'm running Cubase 10.5 on Windows 10, or I'm running, Cubase 11 Pro on Mac Big Sur, that information is often helpful. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. You see some familiar faces on our live stream today. But if you're attending the live stream, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. We'll let some people get logged in. And if you like the live streams, if you've learned stuff, or if you learn a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that as well. And that allows us to continue to do these types of free live streams so people can get the most out of everything going on with their Cubase or Steinberg products. So we usually have a couple of people that help out. So we have Agent K, who usually does moderation on the live streams. He's unable to make it today, so he suggests I give Jazz Dude the power to assign him as a moderator for today. So I've done that. So I'm not sure if Jazz Dude had gotten an email or any correspondence with Agent K, but I've set that up. We will have a index of all the topics covered in today's live stream posted a few hours after the live stream. It'll be pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps, so you could search for topics that were covered and go immediately to that topic. So look for that it should be pinned to the top of the comments field. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. Jan, who's usually on the live streams, does a wonderful job of compiling that information, so you could search. I think I counted up in my spreadsheet of live streams since the pandemic started. We've covered over 10,200 questions-ish. So instead of having to go through each of the live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. Another wonderful resource. Some other wonderful resources of Steinberg information will be the Steinberg official YouTube channels, and also check out the Cubase Nation Discord. Lots of wonderful information. I was just on there this week learning new things myself. And I know Jazz Dude's involved with that. But let's go ahead and take just a quick look, see who is on. So we see Ace Amadeus, we see Oren, we have Jazz Dude Ted Springman from Los Angeles, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, we have Filter Freak, we have Uno Memento from Finland, we have Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. So we have Christian D68 from France. We have Ken from Norway. We'll get started here. We'll just let some people get logged in, and we'll get started here in another minute. We have Sub 403 from British Columbia, Tim from Mission Viejo, Trance 2020 from Berkshire. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Okay. We have John Shaman back on. We have Lori from Finland. Thank you for joining us. And if this is your first live stream, let us know that as well. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce. All right, so I see Jan from Cubase Index. Okay, so we have Shadow Shade from Quebec, and we have Romeo from Stafford in the UK. All right, more people from Finland. We have Daryl from Trinidad and Tobago. We have Matt Elliston from London. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with questions. So we'll probably go for about 4 hours today. One other quick thing before we get started. Friday is the last live stream of the month. So Friday's live stream. So we'll do 2 hours and a 2-hour Zoom meetup. And I always find these to be really wonderful get-togethers. So people that attend the live streams can actually meet and talk to each other. And I think the people who have been on it have all enjoyed them. It's a really wonderful group of people. So we'll have, if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to pass on the Zoom invite link, and we'll post it in the comments on the live stream on Friday. So, all right, so let's get started with Ace Amadeus's question. So it says, Cubase 10.5, it's been crashing after I work on a project for a while. I updated to latest 10.5 version and still get crashes. Any tips to fix this problem? Thanks. So I'm not sure if you get a crash message, but one of the things that you could, you often will get a message, like a crash message, when you do that. And I see a little bit later that you mentioned that the only new things that you've installed was some content, and generally that's not going to cause system crashes. If I think it's Resplendence, if you're running Windows, has a utility called DPC Latency Mon, and that could maybe point out some hardware things that can cause a crash. One other thing that you could try doing is to temporarily reset your preferences. And if you're on Mac or Windows, you could hold down Alt-Option plus Command or Control plus Shift right after starting Cubase. And then you could get asked if you wanted to start with by disabling the program preferences and see if that makes a difference for you, Ace. So, okay, so we have a question from Oren. Hi, Greg. Please show what is needed to set up the MIDI gate and show how it works. Okay, so I saw this question before we got started. So on my master bus here, I just installed a plugin, and it's found under Dynamics called MIDI Gate. So once we have MIDI Gate active, I'm going to put this on my my stereo bus, my kind of like my master fader here. So as I play, we may notice that it's, now that I've enabled that particular plugin, that as soon as I've turned that on, so we can have this play, but as soon as the plugin is on, things get turned off and you don't hear sound. So if that's the case, what you want to do is just to add a MIDI track, and we want to set the MIDI track, its output, or where the MIDI information is going to be sent to, directly to, and you'll probably see just like the name of the track that it's on, plus the MIDI gate. And then so we can see, okay, this MIDI information is now going to be routed to the MIDI gate plugin. So as I play the project, I'm going to press a MIDI note down. We hear the actual audio play, and when I release the MIDI note, it'll be silent. So releasing the MIDI note closes the gate, so it's gonna be silent. And as soon as I press the note down, we hear. So we could kind of So as soon as the MIDI gate is active, it's going to enable, and you can make adjustments. You can say, okay, the note to the release. So as I come here, let's say as we're playing, you could adjust the kind of a release amount, how fast I let go, and it'll go, a little bit longer. But that's really kind of the general idea of the gate, is that you can hit a MIDI note message and kind of open and close the gate. And if you wanted to, toggle that mode as well. So as soon as you play, it turns on, you could toggle that behavior. So, but make sure that you add a MIDI track and that it's routed the output port to the MIDI gate plugin. And then just kind of start hitting your keyboard while you play audio. Okay, question from Oren Bynum. Please explain what the HSSE level is in the mix console. Show me how to delete it. It's taking up too much room on the mix console. So when we add an instrument track, we could see, and we have it routed to HALion Sonic SE. This was HSSE. And I hit add track. At this point, we'll see it'll get added to our mix console. So we see our MIDI track here, and then it's going to be set directly in our mix console. So this could be just seeing a number of different virtual instrument instances. And if we have multiple outputs going, we could see that. So if we delete it from, if we unload and remove the instrument tracks, we won't see it in the mix fader. So that's one method, but you probably have loaded up the tracks for a reason. But what you could do, if there's just too many HSSE tracks going on in the mixer, come over here and you could just say, I want to hide, and we could just choose different tracks. Like say, I want to hide my instrument channels. And at that point, you could just hide all of the instances of the HALion Sonic SE. So there's a couple of things to try, Oren. Okay, question. If you have time, would you show how to mix my R&B tracks with an orchestration template? So I don't have your R&B tracks, but if you want it to, so starting with a template. So if we come to a new project and we go, let's say for scoring, we could probably see, more orchestral stuff. So let's say, okay, I wanted to go to my a Beethoven template. And so many of the templates may not be exactly what you would want to add on top of an R&B track. So if I was, in here, if I wanted to, just have it play flute or oboe, some of my different instruments. So some of these may be just, I would probably take the R&B track and actually, maybe just, add string tracks on top. And I would probably start from that point as opposed to trying to do a template, because a template could be like very specific for, so like some of these will be set up for, particular instruments. So you see like we have Microsoft Wavetable synth, which is on Windows. And I know you're running Mac, Oren. So I would maybe just try to come over here instead of working with a template, because that could be very predefined. And depending upon your project, I would maybe just come over here, start with like HALion Sonic SE. And then, do you need oboes and timpani, or do you just need some string patches? And, come over here, say all instrument sets, and say, okay, just want to go to strings, and I wanted to, try out this particular sound. And what strings are often used on an R&B track may not be what's, classically appropriate for, a classical piece. So it could be a little different, but if you have tracks that you want to send me, I can maybe suggest some, the built-in string sounds for you. Okay, so we have a question from Angelina Gargano. Hi, thanks for your help and advice. I have set up my monitor outs in control room as you stated, but I still can't hear the MediaBay. The only way is to turn off control room, but I need to use both. So see if there's any other maybe like little hidden volume controls in MediaBay here. So let's say if I start auditioning different loops here. So, some obvious things. Here's the little volume control. So if you have the volume down in the control room here. So if you see the playback move, like where we have, sometimes people will click here and it may not start playing back immediately, but it could be that that it's in like maybe preview pause, or you don't have this activated to automatically play. But if you see that move and it's still you're not hearing it, make sure that this volume control, this level, that's the preview volume, is turned on. And it could also be, so sometimes there's a wait for project play, but check this volume level as well. But generally, those will get routed through the listen bus, which is sent to the control room. All right, so great to see Filter Freak on the live stream. All right, and we have Detlef from Dusseldorf. Okay, so we see from Taylor Sapp, some MIDI loops and samples seem to be missing since I installed C11. Windows 10 new computer, I also installed 10.5, and same content is missing, like 68 BPM drum grooves to play in 6-8 times. So let's see if we could find some of that content. So okay, so let's say if I just wanted to just look at the, so I will come over here, let's say to musical, and let's look for time signature. So once we're here, we could just look at the different libraries as we select to see what time signatures are available. Let's say if I just, and let me look on the large MediaBay and just see if we could find, I wanted to just go directly here to VST, let's say factory content, or VST sound. So I will, all right, so let's just switch the category here. So, for the loops, I could see which ones are going to be set to 6/8. And let me see if I can just do a search here for. So I'm not sure, there may not be a lot of 6/8 content that comes with Cubase, but if there's a particular file that you think you're missing from your old computer, maybe if you could let me know what the name of the loop or the MIDI loop is. So if you could let me know the actual name of the loop, and I can see if it actually comes with Cubase, or maybe it's something else that you had downloaded and were and had utilized and kind of found within MediaBay. Okay, I'm going to jump back. So we have question. Okay, could you go over the definition of each control in the detect silence window? Okay, so let's take a look at it. So if we had large gaps in audio recordings of silence and we wanted to get rid of them, we could go to advanced, and I'll activate this project. That would help. So we go to advanced and choose detect silence. All right, so we have kind of our detection. So as soon as we adjust this, we could say, okay, anything that's kind of, outside of this threshold. So anything that's kind of, fits within that. Or we could say, if I just want it to delete only little bits. And as we look at this, so you can say anything that's kind of within these two red lines. So that's kind of setting our open threshold. And we have our closed threshold here. So we could adjust that. So, and then we have the minimum time open. So we could say, this is how long, if we wanted to have more than 1 second of, silence. So if we had, maybe a guitar solo on a track, and then, we just let it record, and there's a guitar solo after the second chorus and a guitar solo at the end. So if there's more than 1 second, or, we can set how much is it good for, is it, it's going to be the minimum time open is going to be for 1 second. So it's going to play back 1 second of data. The minimum time is going to be 100 milliseconds of silence. Excuse me. We could also see kind of the pre-roll, post-roll. So as we wanted to audition, so with the output, we could add these as regions. We could give it region names. We could automatically increment. We could choose to strip the silence manually or do it automatically. So we can see that if it's set to strip silence, I would have to hit compute. And so when I hit process, we could then just see only those particular regions that we've chosen that fit the criteria to not be deleted. Question from Ted Springman. Wonderful to see you on the live stream, Ted. If one creates a VSTI for HALion with original content, how is that content protected from mass copying? So if you are part of the HALion partner program as a developer, all you'd have to do is that would give you, I believe, access to the e-licenser licensing technology. So at that point, when you create your instrument, you'd be able to sell the instrument without fear of spending, months and months creating an instrument and having it widely available without people having to purchase the license for it. So I think when you are part of the HALion partner program, you could get access to the licensing for the e-licenser technology. Okay, so we have a question from Taylor. Video stops after half a second. Video timer and music keep moving. How do I get video to move? Took a long time to load. 1.5 gigabyte MP4 UHD video, 30 frames a second. AMD 32 gigabytes of RAM, SSD. So it's probably going to be that video might have to be compressed, or utilize a different codec for that particular video. And if you want to see kind of which codecs will work best for Cubase, unlike a WAV file that will play back universally, video is going to be much different. So if I come here, let's look at, I'm just going to Google, there's a support page on this. And make sure when you kind of look at the, because you're going to have containers, so when you say it's, and I just want to see if it's, so it's an MP4. So, in video, we have container files. So within, like an MP4, you could have it be an H.263 or H.264. So you probably want to make sure, and there's a number of video utilities. I think Handbrake is a good one that a lot of people use to kind of convert using kind of different codecs for the container types and make sure that those are kind of matched up. Then I think, because otherwise it could be spending a lot of time trying to, decompress the video, or the video could be so large. When you say it's a 1.5 gigabyte video, that's probably pretty large. So it might be working too hard on the system and you might have to compress it a little more. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. We see Matt missed the last live stream because of back surgery, so we hope you're recovering well. Good luck with your recuperation. All right, so we have DM checking in from Portugal. And occasionally my chat field may jump on me, so I'll apologize for that. If I lose a question, okay. All right, so you see Jazz Dudes now. His name is Blue, so he's the moderator. So he has all the power. Okay, question from John Shaman. How many drum programming features in Cubase 11, and briefly, what are their differences? So, you could do a number of different kind of drum programming. You could use the drum editor, so a lot of people do that. Some people use the Beat Designer plugin. So I'll just show you a couple of these quickly. All right, so let's say if I have, so let's start off with maybe the Beat Designer plugin. So if I come here, we could have a, whole slew of different MIDI notes that we could program here. So I will just go solo this, and let's say if I just wanted to, I have this set for 16 steps, but you could have it set to more just by kind of clicking here. So this will allow us to just come here and let's say, at this point, I just want it to have a clap. So this names can be derived directly from the drum map. And if I wanted to adjust the velocity up or down, and let's say, okay, I just want to come here and throw in a couple hi-hats. And let's put a flam on this. So I can kind of click and I'll just put a little bit of a flam. Or not. And let's say, okay, I just want it to come here. And then if you want to apply different swings, and then once you have kind of maybe a pattern that you like, at this point I could also just come over here. We could do stuff like, okay, I just wanted to reverse the pattern to see what that sounds like. Or if I wanted to shift it to the left or to the right. And if I just wanted to insert this directly into, I could say, okay, let's insert the pattern at the left locator. And that would just drop that pattern right directly inside of our project window. So we could have that. Now, once we have parts in the project window, you also have a dedicated drum editor. So at this point, you could, you know, just do kind of more. If you want to see more sounds at once, you could come right over here. So let's say, so I'll just stop the other one from, I'll just turn off the beat designer. So at this point, you could look at it in a dedicated drum editor, and this would also allow you to have kind of more control for as long as you select a select a lane. You could adjust velocities. You could also extend this out. So if you wanted to change the, send this particular sound to a different MIDI output port, different MIDI channel, different MIDI pitch, you could do all that and do kind of more traditional drum editing within the dedicated drum editor. And one question we also often get asked is like, okay, I only see these drums. Can I fold the drum editor? So I could just say, show only sounds that have events and hide everything else. So you could choose to kind of filter out unused drum sounds. So those are a couple different ways to work with doing drum programming in Cubase. All right, so we have Denny checking in from India. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, so we have Michael Stewart checking in from Atlanta. All right, so we have Estonia checking in. All right, so we have Denny Tom says, Denny Tom 83, this is my first live session. Okay, so his first live session with Cubase team. All right. All right, so we have what does pin process do in Nuendo? Direct offline processing. So let me see if it's done here as well. So let's go to so I'm not sure if the pinning is adding. Let me just see if it's, I'll open up Nuendo 11 and see if the pinning is slightly different. Okay, so I think that the pin process, and I could be mistaken on this, sorry for my huge plosive, but the pin process, I believe, will allow you for like this is when handling some third-party plugins. I believe like when people need to do pinning, like to do previewing from like tools like Isotope RX and kind of restoration tools. I believe that's kind of the way to get audio into the plugin and back. So I think that's what the pin process does, but I could just confirm. But I think that's using specific types of plugins for offline processing in Nuendo for especially doing a lot of kind of RX work. Okay, so we have Loretta checking in from Vancouver. Just thanks for all your tips. You're welcome. So, okay. So we have from Christian D68. I have an Integra 7 installed as an external instrument. It works, but I'm not able to master the volume in the mix console. The volume is always the same if I go to 0 or mute the channel. So let's just, I think I will take a look, see if we have an external instrument kind of pre-configured here. Okay, so let's say, if I wanted to do this with my, let's add an instrument track. We're going to send it to an external instrument. So let's say, okay, I want to send it to an O1W. And let's go to the mix console. Okay, so is this, I think that this would be the volume here. So it says, but I'm not able to master the volume in the mix console. The volume is always the same, even if I go to 0 or mute the channel. I don't have the ability. So there is kind of the return gain that you could adjust here as well, but it should. And one thing that it might be is, since it is coming in, see if it could be a direct monitoring issue. So try going to the studio setup for this and make sure direct monitoring isn't turned on. Depending on your audio interface, maybe it's being monitored just on input. So check the direct monitoring status as well and see if that makes a difference. All right, so question from Tanmay. Is there a way to get only Voice Designer for Cubase or third party? So Voice Designer is fixed to being on in Nuendo. So I don't know of a way to do that, but there currently is I think it's a 40% off promotion for Nuendo. And I think that includes, jumping up from Cubase and kind of upgrading or cross grading from Cubase into Nuendo. So So if you want it, so by the time you would invest in a plugin, you might be able to just upgrade to Nuendo or cross grade to Nuendo from Cubase as well if it's a plugin that you really want to be working with, but it's kind of a unique solution. All right. So great to see Brian from Crystal Coast of North Carolina. Okay, so I think it's a follow-up to last live stream or 2 live streams ago about sidechaining lead vocals. So it says what I meant was when I said routing vocals for sidechaining was that I sent the one vocal track to 6 sidechain inputs, meaning the one vocal track is sent to 6 tracks. Last hangout continued. All right, so let me come over here. So let's say we have our vocal track. So it will be when we have, let's say, sidechain inputs on these particular tracks, because the sends and what you might be running into, Tanmay, is the fact that your one vocal track, if we have a number of sends on tracks, so let's say if I come and let's select 2 through 8. And let's go ahead and just add our dynamics. So let's say our compressor. Okay, I think I hit the wrong keys. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm going to enable quick link. And let's add the compressor to all the tracks. So if we wanted to send this one vocal, we have 8 sends. So you're going to be using, these sends for the sidechain input. So it could be that maybe you have 2 vocal, 2 effects. And then, as you add the sidechain input, this can only be sent out. There's 8 sends here. So you may have to just simply duplicate the track to get, so to send, to one sidechain, to sidechain 2, to sidechain 3, it's just going to use one of the 8 available sends for the track. So, it could be that maybe you duplicate the track and that could give you another 8, duplicate again, or send it to a group and send, use the group sends of that vocal to be the sidechain input if you need that vocal to feed more than 6 to 6 sources of independent sidechains. Okay. Also from Tammy, it says, and for coloring, I said content, not track color. It should have it should have some parts in them. Again, Facebook last hangout continued. So let me take a quick look, see if I'll take a look just at my Facebook here real quick on my other computer. Bear with me just for a second, just so. Sorry, you get lots of questions from Facebook Messenger. Okay, so going back to Tammy's question, I'm not sure if I understand the question. It says but let me reread it again. And for the coloring, I said contents, not track color. It should have some parts in them. Again, so I'm not sure if we have, let's say, maybe a longer file, if it's, that you want different parts here to be different colors. So if you wanted like this part to be that, and let's say, that part of the color. So I'm not sure if you wanted it to do that. And I kind of used that recently on a project I was playing bass for. This is one of Michael Team's projects. I'll play just a second of it, but just to show you how I had mine kind of set up. So like if I wanted to find different parts of the song, I guess just find, I think, and if that's what you want, and if I'm misunderstanding Tanmay, just let me know. But let me see if I could just find, I think it was this project. So like when I was tracking, what I would do is often just kind of leave different colors of the song. I shall live forever on tomorrow night. So I knew like and that this meant something different or different song arrangement ideas. So like this was going to be the chorus. So I knew like as I was recording my bass part that when that part came up again, that we could know that. And I think green was when there was no vocals and I could, maybe change the bass part up. So I'm not sure if that's what you want to do, Tammay, but maybe if you could ask the question again in a different way. So keyboard using the sampler track. Okay, so let's say if I come here to my MediaBay, let's say if I have this and I just want to make this into a quick sampler track. Okay, so, as we, so the pitch here will be just determined, across the keyboard, but not necessarily based on the samples. So, the velocity will be determined, by the velocity that's played. So if you wanted it to have like, multiple velocity layers across different keys that you could hit, it doesn't do that. But if you wanted to just trigger the velocity, within the key itself, it's going to be, it's going to respond to velocity to the sampler track. Okay, so we have Marvel iJam checking in from Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Denny Tom 83. How to send different mixes for different musicians. Okay, so if we wanted to do this, Just find a project I usually use for this. Okay. And we could use this in Cubase Pro or Nuendo with the control room capability. So I'm going to go to kind of, let's say I have, you know, drums, guitar, and voice. So I'm going to go to my full screen mixer, and we want to just activate when we go to our audio connections. You want to just go to the control room, and this is where you could activate our different cues. So I'm going to add a cue mix, and we'll just call this, you know, bass. And let's add a cue mix, and we probably want these cue mixes that are going out of outputs of our audio interface to different headphone outs. So let's call this drums. Okay, so now we want to go to the racks and make sure that cue sends are enabled. I want to right click in the cue sends, and I'm going to first select all of the tracks in the mixer. Okay, so I right click in the cue sends, which is kind of at the top of the control room. And we want to go to all cues, and we want to first activate the cues. And then we want to copy the mix over. So say use the current mix levels, and then we could also assign the current pan levels as well. So this is going to basically mimic the mix that we have in the control room across all the different channels. So when I come here, we can say, okay, I wanted the drums to have more drums in the drummer's headphone mix. So I'm going to select my drum tracks here. And I have quick link active, so I'm going to increase the drums in the drummer's mix, the bass in the bass player's mix. So when I go to listen to it now, this is my control room. But when we listen to Q Mix 4, that's the drummer's headphone mix. And so you listen to the drummer's headphone mix, that's the bass player's headphone mix. And let's say, oh, the drummer wants to hear more bass. They're the kindred spirits. So you say, okay, let's take the bass part here and send it more to the drummer's headphone mix. And the bass player now wants to hear more kick drum. So we could just come over here to the kick and say, okay, in the bass player's headphone mix, so I'll just say, okay, I just want the So that's how you could set up kind of different Q mixes using, you could have 4 independent Q mixes plus the control room mix. So you could have 5 Q mixes that you could distribute. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to save a track preset with MIDI and audio content in it so that whenever I load the track preset, it also imports the content? So audio and MIDI. So I think that the audio and MIDI would be handled basically as 2 different types of track presets, but let's give it a shot. I'll jump back to one of my other projects that we had open. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to save this and this, we might have to save these as a track archive. So right, so I'll just call this Tanmay. And I'll do new project. Sorry, I'll just choose an empty project here. Okay, so I'll come over here, track presets, and I think it might be under multi. So drag this over. So that will save all the different preset information, so all the contents. So we come over here. So you could just save the 2 different track presets and call it in. And if you want it to like do it with the media, try exporting the selected tracks and then importing a track archive. Okay, so you just see from Tanmay, it's like, can I just buy Voice Designer for Cubase? Just getting Nuendo for that doesn't seem reasonable and responsible. So, you know, I understand that you could be frustrated that you want one particular tool, but, you know, when you're buying that, it's not kind of an, you know, unfortunately the programs aren't kind of an a la carte where people get to pick you know, what features they want from different programs, or the different features are at different levels. I don't see that that's irresponsible in any way. It's, you know, like if I have a car, you know, I wouldn't expect to, you know, if I have a, you know, a car to, you know, at one model level that I would be able to, you know, get an engine part from another car, you know, just because I wanted that one feature from a more expensive car. So okay, so we have a question from Jeff Zabelski. Hi, Greg. HALion Sonic. Programs, multis, layers. I get that a program has 4 layers, but loading a layer as a program anew with MediaBay, it's not a layer, but a program. It perplexes me a bit. So, you know, within MediaBay, we could always think of everything's going to be a program, and then you're going to have internal to particular plugins, you may have different nomenclature for, you know, like a multi patch, or, you know, so, but, you know, the individual sound layer, that's what MediaBay is going to be dealing with. So, but, you know, so think of it like that. And then once you're in the instrument, you could load up your multi programs, and, you know, so hopefully that will kind of make sense. Wonderful to see Millard Brown on the live stream from outside Philadelphia. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Apologies if this sounds silly, but how do I pan different percussion elements using the drum map, especially if I'm using external hardware? Do I need to render first? So, you know, generally, you know, it's up to, if you're doing an external instrument, it's up to the external, you know, generally when we do panning to external instruments, I don't know if an external instrument doesn't work this way. And we have, you know, a panning control that, you know, how MIDI works, channel. So you could do panning on, generally most drum modules or, external instruments will have all the drums on the same MIDI channel. So panning is going to be a channel specific, so you can't pan individual notes on external hardware, not that I know of. You can in some instances of, VST 3.5 instruments. We'll see this coming in MIDI 2.0. But I don't know of any MIDI 2.0 instruments that are on the market currently. So you may have to, record it as audio and do panning. Yeah, and it's just one of those limitations of MIDI since 1982 that, controllers are going to be channel based and not note based. So you may be able to pan internally within the instrument itself, but, where you could adjust it, you might be able to pan the individual drums within the instrument. And that's really up to how the instrument is designed. But it's not going to be a message that's going to be sent from a drum map or from the sequencer that does that. Okay, so I just see a comment. Please make Indian sounds VST better. Okay, so I guess if you want more Indian content, so I could pass that along. Okay, so we have, so I'm just saying, hi, Greg. After update the UR44 tools, I lost a function audio hardware setup under Studio. I removed all UR44 files and installed again, but no result. The hardware inputs are gone in the mixer. So let's see if the UR, so it says you lost the function audio hardware setup. So there's going to be a, when you go into the installer, let me just see if I have maybe like a UR44 download. Let me just see. But there's different components of the installer, and you just, so there's going to be a driver and a tools. So it says that you've, reinstalled all the tools, but you're saying that the hardware inputs are gone in the mixer. So do you actually make sure, one, that if you're saying that the hardware inputs are gone in the mixer here, do you actually, if you go to your audio connections, do you have those inputs assigned, to a UR44 channel, so that when you go to your audio connections and you go to your inputs, that these are connected to a UR44 input? But there is just a tool. So sometimes there's a driver and a tools for UR44. Make sure that you're not just installing the driver. There's several different install files, but if you don't have it actually selected under audio connections, under inputs, if it's not defined to a UR44 input, you may not see it in the mixer as well. So make sure you have that. Okay, question from Tanmay. Is there a way to just hear sub bass in tracks without any boosting or EQing, so I can add bass 60 hertz and above, specifically 100 to 150 to 300 hertz range? Mixers say I'm lacking that range of bass warmth. All right, so if you want to know, and generally, like when I hear this, it's not a problem with the mix console, but this is often kind of indicative of maybe the room has standing waves. Like, I'm not sure if your room is treated, but if you want it to just isolate to particular, let's say if I just play this drum loop here. And let me just go to my control room. So, you know, if you want it to, like on your master bus, just go to like frequency EQ. You know, you could, sorry about that. Cubase just acted up, but yeah, I think you could probably, if you use, just try this one more time again quickly. You know, you could probably just isolate it with a multi-band. Let's see if we could do it with frequency as well. So let's say I'm playing along here. So let's see if we could isolate the frequencies in frequency, if we could solo these. Okay, so let's try like a multi-band. So even if you grab something like the Imager plugin or just about any multi-band, you know, you could just solo just, you know, that's from 150 down, but you could just say, okay, I want that to go 300 and just solo without adding gain. But the one thing that, you know, happens a lot is when you have, you know, rooms that are where bass is building up in the corners from the monitors, you know, and this is why you put bass traps in the corners of the rooms. So when you have those frequencies collecting, often they could be accentuating the bass. So it sounds like your bass is really good when you're mixing because the low end information is there. But a lot of times it's not necessarily coming out of the speakers the way you want, but it's just kind of growing by itself, almost kind of like a cancer, like a frequency cancer, and it's building up in the back of the rooms. So, you know, most of the time when people, you know, have that saying, it's not going to be their mix, but it's going to be their room that is sending too much bass, and then you compensate for that in your mix. But if you needed to isolate those particular frequencies, you know, like the Imager plugin or a multi-band compressor, that will help you with that. Okay, question from Taylor Sapp. When I audition loops through the floating MediaBay window, the volume is fixed and doesn't change. When I move the preview volume slider, works fine in right zone. Okay, so let's take a look at our MediaBay. So let's say I just wanted to come here and let's find all right, so it's just okay, so I'm gonna so it's kind of use the same. So I'm not sure if you're doing it. Says when I audition loops through the floating MediaBay window, the volume is fixed and doesn't change. When I move the preview volume slider, works fine. So that all kind of seems to kind of work as expected here. So make sure that this is the volume slider that you're using, Taylor. If you could let me know that, that would be helpful. Okay, so a question from Tanmay. Best way to mix tracks? Any suggestions, tricks? There's, the thing you have to do is make a lot of mistakes first and kind of learn from it. Use reference tracks, load up a reference track, and you could route it through the control room so that you could just simply, have a reference track available. A lot of people, I know that will do this, will spend a lot of time, and I think of Elliot Shiner, who's probably one of the most amazing mix engineers I've ever gotten, a chance to hear, let alone like sit in a room with him when he's working, which is, fascinating. But, he mixes. Some people, tend to mix very soft, and that is a very viable thing to do, especially if you have, maybe your room isn't treated, so a lot of people say, okay, like a rock thing, you may have to kind of mix loud, to feel it, but a lot of people may mix like really soft. And here you could say, okay, I should be hearing like the snare and the vocal well, even at this volume. And once you're, listening to it, at a very low volume, it's at that point, you're very kind of actively engaged listening to it. Phil Ramone, who I also got to be in the studio with, one thing I noticed that he would do is, they would set a relatively good monitoring level and make sure never to adjust it at that point, so, he kind of picked a monitoring level and he just stayed there, knowing that if he was having to turn up, that he was kind of lying to himself. And at that point, so think of your monitoring volume strategy. If you had, maybe a room with like low end, build up, I would maybe think of, monitoring very soft, and, because you could really actively engage your listening. But, check out, like great arrangements, make great mixes. If you listen to many of the phenomenal recordings, is because the arrangements aren't clashing, where, the bass drum isn't tuned to E flat when the bass is playing a low E, the key of the song. The piano player, the keyboard isn't in the way of the bass, or the guitar and keyboards aren't clashing with each other. They aren't clashing with the vocals. So, it's like simple things that aren't necessarily like, just do this trick. But just kind of good musical sense can often make a big difference. But if you have tracks that you want to share, I'd be happy to take a listen to it for you, Tanmay. All right. So wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. All right. Say Gareth is about to listen in while building a desk. So good luck. All right. It's always no fun. Okay, so question, is there a way Cubase can determine what time signature I'm playing? My online friend said in a collab, I told you to play in 4/4, not 6/8. What does it even mean? I didn't understand. Okay, so let's take a look. So, we could think of your time signature. So I'll just do a new project here. And it's just kind of like the little divisions of how a song is created. So, we have these kind of inherent ideas of, what is a song. So say we're listening to bars and beats. The most common time signature will be 4/4. So if we turn on our click track, we'll hear kind of the downbeat, and that's going to be like the downbeat of the measure. So we look at this. All right, we can see the downbeat, and then we have, that's often so this will be measure 1. And then if we look at this, we see beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, then measure 2. Now measure 2, when it starts there, that's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. So this is a very common time signature. So if we turn this on, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So a lot of music is done like that. Now, if you're doing a waltz, you may be in 3/4. So this could be like a classic waltz or Strauss. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. So we listen to our metronome. Now, when we go to 6/8, we can think of this as going to be, so when we look at this, we say like 4/4 means that there's 4 quarter notes, and the quarter note here gets the beat. And we go to 3/4, that means that there's 3 quarter notes, and the beat is on the quarter note. So let's go to 6/8. So an eighth note is half the time of a quarter note. So when we come here to 6/8, we may have different pulses. So this may be, so we'll listen to 6/8. Now some people can count this as 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so you could count it and break it down. So here the eighth note gets the beat, and there's 6 divisions. So that's kind of the difference between like 6/8 and 4/4. So after a while, you could kind of recognize these patterns. So just try counting along with the song that you hear, and if it's going to be like da 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 da, so that's going to be kind of like 6/8 probably. So if it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, that will be 4/4 or common time. So after a while, you could kind of just, when you listen to music, try to figure out the musical pulses and the divisions, and then you could determine which time signature that you're in. All right, wonderful that Neurotic Nexus can make it for the live stream. Okay, so I just see a question from Sergio that's in Spanish, and my Spanish is rusty. So I think if he's wanting a video on maybe a tutorial video on electric guitars and bass. But maybe maybe Gareth, if I know Gareth lives in Spain, but maybe if someone that could translate that would be helpful for me. So just see, hi Greg, 10.5 user on exported stereo track. I have a glitch in the middle of an audio track while an open project. It's all fine. I realize that this happens when I have an overlapping in audio track. All right. So let's say if we had me just find a quick two. Let's. Okay, so let's come over here and let's say if I have these two tracks overlapping, we may get, I'll make this kind of an especially bad edit here. Okay, so let's say if I listen to this, so it could be like, I would, so if you have an edit like that where, here we can see that it's going to be doing like a crossfade. So let's say if I have something like that, so we should hear that. So if you have overlapping audio, sometimes you may not hear it in the project because maybe you have auto fades turned on. So let's say if I just have this set to auto crossfade, and this will do it on playback. So you could enable kind of auto fades for playback, but that may not carry over to the exported file. So if you know where that glitch is, just come here, maybe hit the letter X, and then you could just, edit the particular crossfade. So, and just kind of check the edits as well. So if you come here, sometimes you could visually see when there's going to be an edit where you're going to hear a click or pop. So see if you could maybe just do a crossfade, because sometimes you could do edits that will kind of play back the fades that may not be translated into the exported file. Okay, so Gareth wants people to hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that, and it enables us to continue to do these live streams to help the community. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see. Okay, so I may have lost some questions. I apologize for that. So, if I had missed your question, just feel free to ask it again. So I just see, is there a way to create melodies using Beat Designer? So, it's not the best melodic tool, but it is just going to be, MIDI information. So if you wanted to, you could, it's probably not the fastest way, but let's say if I wanted to add an instrument track and I wanted this to be, and I'll just put on a piano part. Okay, so when I want to go to my MIDI inserts, I could definitely go to Beat Designer. And if I hit play here, we could. So you could come up with some interesting stuff if you're looking for maybe a fresh approach or a different idea. If you're in a rut, you could definitely kind of use Beat Designer on melodic material as well. So. Okay, so we just see from Jeff Sabelski, so he has a new project. It's I add HALion Sonic 3, load all 16 slots with programs, now programs into 16 slots, efficient way to create the MIDI tracks with the programs in the slots. So if I start with an instrument track, and let's say at this point I wanted to just add an organ, I wanted to add a string part. So I have all these different, let's say keyboard, say dynamic soft piano. I wanted to add a guitar, like a harp glissando. Let's add a synth lead. Let's add maybe a vocal. All right, so I've added 7 more sounds. So when I come here, and let's say if I come here, we have, and we'll do our harp glissando. All right, let's say strings. And so once if I start with an instrument track, all I have to do now is say I want to add 6 MIDI tracks. So while that's selected, I'll add 6 MIDI tracks. And now each of these will be assigned. So now when I play, it's going to play back to string part. So this will automatically keep the same it'll keep the same MIDI port and increment the MIDI channel. So we're on HALion Sonic SE MIDI channel 3. I go down. Now the dynamic soft piano. So we see that this is channel 4. I go down now. We're on channel 5. And I go down. And let's go down to vocal effects. So just, add MIDI tracks, directly select the instrument track that you start with HALion Sonic, then add 15 MIDI tracks, and they'll automatically be assigned so that each new track will be incremented to new MIDI channels and assigned to the same instrument. All right, and I see another question from Jeff. How do slot programs get imported into the mixer? So as soon as we are, the mixer is going to be just contingent upon, it's like when we go to the mix. So each of these we can have go to its own independent stereo out. So they could, by default, probably all be submixed to main. And as I add, let's say slot 2, slot 3, we'll see that my mixer is growing. So now these will all be basically mapped to their own. I'll go up. Let's say now I'll just go here, give that to focus, go down. And you can see that the mixer underneath is just automatically incremented. So the mixer is going to be tied to when you click on the mix tab. So as soon as you click on that mix tab, whatever, so I'll just switch here, go down. So the mixer slots are just going to be routed to directly there. So I just see, hi Greg, any shortcut for freeze instrument channel? So I don't think that there is a particular keyboard shortcut for it, but we'll just take a look. So let's say if I have some... Yeah, so, but if you wanted to, you could set up a keyboard shortcut to do render in place. So at this point, if I'm here, let's set up just a quick keyboard shortcut. I think we could do that from... So I could just say I want it to come here. Let's make it... So I have this. So now I could just choose to have a keyboard shortcut and then just have that rendered as an audio file right there. Okay, so I just see from it says VST plugin scanning error coming. So maybe if you could let us know, you know, if you could expand upon that. Sorry, I may have lost some questions. So if you think that I may have lost your question, if you go back in your chat, you could, you know, feel free to ask your question again. Sorry that sometimes the chat field gets too populated. Okay, we have a question. Hi, Greg. Could you tell what to do to get the drum sound list back in the drum editor? It disappeared after I click undo a few times. And I can't get it back. Neither manual nor the internet helps. So that drum list that you're seeing is going to be going to be created from the drum map. So let's say if I have a Groove Agent SE here, and I'll just go ahead and load up a quick kit. Okay, so when we have your data here, so by default, Cubase you could use a GM drum map. So a lot of different instruments will kind of be close to a GM drum map. So now when I go to my drum editor, I could see the list of all the sounds. So once again, once we click here, you'll see it may say no drum map. You just want to click there, say drum map. Now, if you have Groove Agent SE, we could just say create drum map from the instrument. And if you do that, then it will automatically extract the drum sounds directly from Groove Agent. So you don't have to make those. You could just simply extract it automatically. But once you have the drums, just come right over here. And you could start off with the GM map, and then you'll see some drum names. See Jazz Dude just doing an awesome job with the moderation. Thank you for jumping in. Hope it wasn't too much of an imposition on you. All right, so we have from the Monk Beats question. Can I use the same in-out channel of my card for an external instrument and effects? I have a second computer, Cubase. I want to use it as an external synth or reverb. So you could do it. You may have to manually set it up. But one of the tricks that you could try, if you go to your audio connections, you can see external effects and external instruments, is try to just come over here and save it as a favorite. So once you have it configured, right click, click on add to favorites, and then you can choose whether you want it to, whether you wanted to work it as an instrument or have those output ports configured directly as an effect. So just try, once you have it configured, save as favorite, and then you can load up whatever configuration you want. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas on the live stream. Okay. So just see we had it says no when adding VST plugins, plugin manager when scanning something coming error. So and it's from Chethan De Silva or Chethan De Silva. So if you could let us know if it's before the program opens or if it's while scanning in the. So it sounds like maybe it's scanning in the VST plugin manager, and if it's stuck on a particular plugin, and also let us know if some of the plugins have been blocklisted. Okay, we have a question from Millard Brown. Hi, I just got an expression pedal. I plug it into a Novation Impulse 61. Somehow it seems to be moving the track I'm focused on when I use it. Am I hallucinating or is there a setting to fix? So it's probably so let's go to your studio setup. So probably it's using maybe like a Mackie control or a generic remote to interpret the MIDI information into doing different MIDI transport functions. So it could be like, and we get this a lot when someone hits the play button on their keyboard and it spits out a MIDI note. So often these are just actual MIDI notes that are set up for the control. So probably your Novation has it set up so that MIDI message of an expression pedal is part of the control. So check to see if you may be able to say, when I use this, this controller, it's going out of this port. So your Novation, you may have, like we could see on my Nectar controller, that will have several different communication ports. So it could be that you want your expression to go out of a different port rather than the MIDI port that it uses to communicate for transport control and for controlling the DAW. So I think if you make sure that MIDI message isn't going out of the control port but going out of the MIDI port, that you should be all set. Okay, so question. When mixing for Dolby 5.1, should I use Cubase 11 or Nuendo 11 to have the rendered file play properly to a home theater surround system? So, generally your home theater surround system isn't going to take if you're playing it through Dolby. So let's see. So, generally, unless your home theater surround system has like 5.1 analog inputs, it's not, or if it's going to take, 6 channels directly from the, like 6 discrete channels, then it probably won't work. So some of the older receivers would do that, but so when you say mixing for Dolby 5.1, for it to play back through most receivers with HDMI inputs or digital input, it's going to need to be encoded. So you need to take those 6 channels from Cubase or Nuendo, and it's really the same methodology and the same, Nuendo is not going to give you an advantage, but you would need to encode those 6 channels down to 2 channels of information through a Dolby digital encoder. And at that point, you would need to have that file decoded through your receiver. So you probably will need, you probably won't be able to just, hook up an HDMI from your computer and send it out, because it needs to be encoded to Dolby Digital. So you'll need to get a Dolby Digital encoder to do that, but it's not going to take it directly from your computer. It's going to have to be, probably, 99% of receivers that have been made in the last 15 years, maybe 20 years, you would need to have it encoded for it to play back through your receiver. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan on the live stream. Okay, so we have from Graham Wiltshire. Hi, Greg. Question. I want to send an instrument track score to another musician. How do I export a score in Score Editor as a PDF or other file so as to email? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so if I'm here in the Score Editor, let's say I have this, and I want to see this in my page view. So I come over here. All right, so we see that I wanted to export this. So most of the times what we could do is just choose to export scores. But you could, what I would do is, take the score here and, just go to, you could do this in Mac and PC. Just go to, your file to print, and I'll just say, okay, we're going to print it as a PDF file. So we'll just call it Graham. And I will put it onto my computer desktop. All right, and let's now come back. And here's a PDF file of our score. So just do a print to PDF file. All right, so we see okay, so I just see how will I get the software? This is from Alhaji. So I think, if you want to get the software, if it's about getting Cubase, you could just get it from your local dealer or the Steinberg online shop. Okay, so we have a question, sir. Can you show how to mastering in Cubase? Okay, so, we have Wavelab is kind of a dedicated mastering tool. So, but, if people want to do stuff in Cubase, you could do processing for doing like a quick mastering here as well. So if you wanted to kind of enhance like the stereo mix down, there's a number of plugins to do that. So I'll just quickly revert. So say we listen to this, and if someone sent me a 2-track file and I needed to kind of enhance and master it, I would go to the mix console, and this is where I would kind of probably add effects. So here, if I want to do some EQ, like maybe the low end's a little too much. So make it a little less floppy. And maybe this, give it a little bit of and let's, if we wanted to make it sound like a little, give it a little more gain, you could just come over here, maybe run it through under dynamics, like a maximizer or a brick wall limiter. There's also a lot of multi-band. So if you want to do like a multi-band compressor, or let's say even you could try squasher on here, see what it does. Maybe like a little bit of an imager plugin. You could also do stuff like Magneto. So you can see that's where we were, just a couple plugins. You can, not to say that's a good job or anything, but just like those are some of the different plugin processes that you may want to utilize for kind of a quick mastering type scenario inside of Cubase. And a lot of those same plugins you'll find inside of Wavelab as well. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a workaround to not being able to set a triplet grid in the sample editor for audio warping? Free warp will lock to points to regular grid, but not to triplet or dot it. So if you're not familiar with this, so there isn't a real good workaround. I know I've passed this on to developers in the past, and I'll make sure to kind of reiterate it. So I know that they're aware of it. It may not just hit the highest priority. So when we have our grid set, we could set kind of your grid based upon the quantizer value on the project window. So we could say, okay, I just want to use the quantize value for the grid here on the project window, but we don't necessarily, it doesn't correlate over. So here we're just going to have it be kind of tuplet based as opposed to triplet based. So, so as we want to do free warping, if you wanted to just align to the grid for triplets, it doesn't necessarily have that currently in the sample editor, but I know that the team is aware of it, so hopefully we'll see that addition coming in the future. So we have a question from Michael Pierce. I don't know if I've missed this before, but can you export the chord track as tablature? So, if you wanted to come over here. So, generally tablature is going to be for an actual part, but if you wanted to see like guitar chords as like a guitar chord voicing, I think we could do that. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. Okay, so in this project we have, we see our chord track. So let's say I'll just add a quick. All right, so I'm just going to go to my scores menu to advanced layout, and we'll choose to display chords. Okay, so we can see now I'll say display chords. And let me just see if I can find. Go to our settings here. I think there is like a preference for this where you could automatically kind of have the chords carried over for this. Let me see if I could find it. See if it's maybe in the preferences. It might be buried in the settings here somewhere. Maybe under notation style. Oh, probably under guitar library. All right, so let me just try from like one other quick project. Where I'll generate it from the score here. Okay, so if I select this part and then click on make chord symbols. So I know there's a way to automatically have it. Just take one more look in the notation style, and I may be able to play around with this a little more after, but I know that there is a preference to, or there used to be, to automatically have the chords display the guitar chords. Yeah, if you want to email me, Michael Pearson, I could take a look at it for Friday's live stream as well. But if you wanted to turn this into tablature, technically, according to your question, I could just come here and we could do like standard guitar tuning, and then you could turn that into tab. But I think it's the chords that you wanted. Okay, so we just see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, fully loaded HALion Sonic multi-program layers with Polyphony up to 120 per VSTI. Can we tell how many notes, MIDI messages are being stolen in the options tab, cache memory? So let's go ahead and take a look. So I don't know if it would show you the stolen notes. But I'm not sure if if your part is doing 120, because I think we could actually, when we go to MIDI here, you could set, so it's each channel has 128 voices of polyphony or unlimited polyphony. So so I'm not sure if you're actually stealing any polyphony, so it may take a big project to have, 2048 voices of polyphony going on at once per instance. So, but let's say if we go to option tab and then cache, so I don't think that it's going to actually show you the amount of voices. But again, if once you go to MIDI here, you could set, you could add 128 voices of polyphony per instance. Okay, so we see a question, should I buy Cubase for my iPhone DAW? So it's Cubasis is available for iOS and Android. So yeah, that's great. You could use Cubasis and capture ideas and then be able to, very easily just, transfer that directly into Cubase and do more work if you need to. So if you're find yourself that you're forgetting ideas, definitely work on Cubase. Or if you're, commute on a bus or in planes, it's a wonderful tool for that. Okay, it says I've been using Cubase LEAI Elements 11 for a couple weeks. I've been working on an album, but I'm trying to find a really clean, powerful guitar tone. So I think with that version you have the VST amp, or not the VST amp rack, but the lower version. But it could depend on which level that you're in. But if you come over here, you can go to the amp simulator. So there are some really good tones that you could find in here and tweak, where you could adjust kind of different cabinet positions and, speaker placement. So if you want to adjust like low or high and being able to EQ, so, play around with that. So you can get some really great tones with that in the lower end versions. And depending which, if you have LEAI or Elements, which one you're running, I think that will work. So, all right, wonderful to see that Pablo has made the live stream. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right. Okay, just reading through comments. All right. All right, still reading through comments here. All right, so lots of people are happy to see each other on the. Okay, so we have a question. How do MIDI slowdown effect? If you get what I mean, it sounds like. All right, so a lot of times it's not a MIDI effect. It's going to be kind of an audio effect, because MIDI will just kind of, sometimes the instrument will do maybe pitch bend. So if you are pitch bending and a sound, you could do it via MIDI. So if I wanted to take, you could set like the pitch bend range. So if I wanted to just come here to this, and, but you could, usually kind of set the pitch bend range to be far, like, longer. So if you, let me just see if I could remember where to, if it's the pitch bend ranges in here. So, but it's often going to be like pitch bend that will do that. In some of the, let me just see if we could, where it is in this particular player. But maybe I'll show it in a different instrument. But a lot of times what you could also do that is just one of the included plugins, which will be, so say if I'll destroy this song, so I'll go to my mix console, and you can do stuff like I want to take Loop Mash FX, which you can find under Other. So you could do like kind of tape drop sounds. If you wanted to, or if you wanted to be faster. So that way you could process that, and you could actually play that via a MIDI note message as well. So let me know if that's what you want to do, Ali. All right, so Pablo wants people to hit the like button as well as John Costigan. All right, so question, how can I learn more about sample editing basics, keyboard shortcuts? So let's go ahead and I'll just take a look at a couple of loops. So I'll just do a quick sample editing. Okay, so now I'm here. So let's say, you know, you have your different tabs. So if you want to go to like hit points are often like really essential. So if you want to find the rhythmically significant points of the audio file, you could just come over here. You could also convert these and make a groove, or if you wanted to create warp markers. And if you create warp markers, you can now just come and enable free warp here and then be able to adjust like little, you know, if you had like some timing issues, and if you wanted to just drop a warp marker in, I think it's, you know, you could just grab, I think maybe the pencil tool and hold down Alt or Option. So you could, you know, come over here and be able to kind of rhythmically move stuff. You'll have, you know, doing processes. So if you wanted to just be able to, you know, say, okay, I just wanted to do a fade in on the file. So you'll have different processes. If it's kind of like a musical vocal part, you could just come over to VariAudio and be able to do all the pitch correction. One thing that a lot of people miss is, you know, the segments. So if you, let's say you recorded like a whole bunch of guitar solos, you could, and you want to take just like little bits and pieces, is you could go to the setup window here and go to regions. And just with the range selection tool, just say you wanted to add a region, and you could give it a name and say, you know, or like we see this being used for interviews. Okay, you know, this is where the really interesting part of the radio interview was, and we're going to skip that. And this is our pull quote. And as we do this, we can just add these regions, and these regions are basically little shortcuts to the file. So it's a new in and out point of the file. But when we go to our pool window, what you could do is if you go to the pool window here, you'll see our vocal file. You see this little plus sign that indicates that we have regions here. So I could select all of these files, and if I want to turn those into their own separate audio files, I could just go to audio to bounce selection, and we could choose the folder, and now they're going to be created as new audio files. So if you need to break up audio files easily, that's a great way to do it. So okay, so I see from Jeff, the first 40 pages of HALion Sonic 3 manual scrambled my brain. I'm in recovery. Is there a Steinberg glossary? So it could be, probably the glossary might be at the end. So try with the last 40 pages, see if that helps. But, you know, and a lot of times, a lot of stuff's pretty straightforward, and just kind of play around with it and get kind of more experiential use out of it. And I think that will get you where you want to go. And then if you have more questions, just let us know. I want to thank Jazz Dude for doing a great job of moderation today. So we appreciate it. Him jumping in. Hey Greg, I'm having an issue while mixing bass guitar where only one or two notes are poking too far out of the mix volume wise. What would you recommend as the best method to even that out? So sometimes you may have just a note on a bass, and I'm a bass player, so I, know when to look for this. And I'll show and see if there's. This is one of Michael Team's projects that I played bass on, and I think Gareth played guitar, and maybe Pablo on drums. But we'll play a little bit of this and see if we can find a note that's a little. So let's say like if one of those notes was a little, like I wanted to take this note, this one is a little bit out of context. What I would do is just kind of select the note, and you could hit like Shift X. And I would, a lot of times, and I see people I know doing this for vocals constantly, and they'll just take that one little note and bring it ever so slightly down. So, if you could do stuff like that just on one note, I see a lot of people then, will often just do lots of compression and try to, do it more corrective. And you could just, very easily just come right here and just kind of do clip gain. So, select it with the range tool, or if like this note was not, you wanted this note to be a little louder, Shift X, and that will automatically create that. And you can just go to the center and just kind of bring up a note or bring down a note, and that could make a big difference where you're not using dynamics processing for correction, and you just kind of do a little tweak here or there on one or two notes. So all right, so Gareth has coined a new term, cubendonica. So that's a good one. All right. Okay, so we see from David Rogers, says, "Hi Greg, I'm actually here today. Thank you for trying to explain Melodyne. It's my understanding I can achieve the same results using VariAudio with the lead vocal. Can you demonstrate pitch and timing?" So yeah, we'll go ahead and take a look at it. So we showed a little bit on the last live stream as well, but we'll do it again. So, you could definitely run Melodyne, via ARA, just go to audio, select the file, go to audio to extensions, and you'll see Melodyne show up there. But if you wanted to use kind of some of the internal tools, I'll make this. So we'll go to our VariAudio here. So there's two different sets of tools. Just go for show all of the smart controls. So to show you some of the basic functionality, so let's say if I wanted to take this tool, so this could work, VariAudio could work in conjunction with the chord track. It's really handy. So if I wanted to just go to my project window, go to chord track, I'll say, let's create chord symbols from the piano part. So now when I come back over here, we could actually colorize based upon the chord track. So as soon as I enable this, we can see that green notes will fall within the chord, kind of blue notes within the scale, and red notes out of key. So if I wanted to, let's listen to our vocal and in context. So most of the time what you could do is just kind of select all of the phrases, and if you go to the bottom center, we could adjust and now we'll move it to the nearest pitch. If we go to the top center, we could adjust the vibrato. So we could regulate the vibrato. Looking at, a lot of times people may drift flat at the end of notes. We could see this little diamond, and we could move that diamond to the beginning. If we go to the upper right-hand corner, we could bring up the pitch just right there. And if I wanted to, like maybe it's scooping at the beginning of a note, we could just bring up the pitch at that particular element. We may want to also have natural transitions between words. So let's say if I wanted to tame the vibrato in this note, but not do it based upon the actual file. I wanted to tame the vibrato, but leave the in and out transition. We could see this little kind of triangle here in the upper corners. And as we adjust that in, I can now regulate the kind of the tonal center of the pitch without affecting the transitions. If I wanted to hold down my Alt or Option key, I could just come here and tilt the pitch like so, or I could adjust the formant of the pitch of individual notes if you do that for a long time, or we could adjust the volume of each segment. To create a new segment, I could just click here and be able to have segments. So if I wanted to just treat that as separate entities, or if we needed to make this note longer or shorter, we could adjust the actual timing of particular notes to get different rhythmic feels. We could also see if I want to see what the piano notes were from a MIDI track, we could see that kind of overlaid directly with the parts here. So I could say, okay, I wanted to move this to, a note that the piano is playing. So, we could see a reference MIDI track. We could also enable MIDI input. So if I wanted to just play notes, we could just turn that on right there. So as I play. And of course, being able to take this and extract MIDI information from it. So that's a quick overview. And we did, a bit on the last live stream, and you could look for it in the chat field as well, David. So thanks for coming back and asking a question about VariAudio. Okay, reading through different comments here. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. If you've learned something, make sure that you have hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. All right, wonderful to see Captenergy Music on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Michael Teams wants everyone to hit to whack the like button. Okay, so we have Richard checking in from Montreal. Okay, lots of great discussion. So I see from Taylor Sapp that he used the same volume slider in the main MediaBay that he did for on the right preview, and it's still kind of a fixed volume. So not sure what's causing that. So, but I could do some more research if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see a question from Jeff Zabelski. How to mix, then how to mix down, turn everything down in the mixer to start gradually add tracks, colors, dynamics. It's easier to turn up than down until you clip in the master output gain. So I'm not sure if it's a question or just maybe advice that Jeff is passing on. If you let me know, Jeff, if you want me to kind of show that, I could, but I think this might be in relation to maybe another problem or someone else's question. So. Okay, so we see from Jay from Connecticut. Let's see, maybe missing this in Nuendo Cubase. Wondering if there is a plugin combiner like Waves SoundGrid or Kilohertz Snap Heap. If no, please request. Just let me know if there's, if there's a particular function that you're trying to do, because a lot of people may send it to groups as well and be able to do some more stuff like that. To see comment from Adele de Jeremilo. Greg is spitting knowledge right now. This is 5 to 10 years of experience time minimum. So, people could pick it up pretty quickly, I guess. But I hope I could be able to share some knowledge I've gained over time. So I've been working with Steinberg over 29 years now. So. And in learning Cubase, Gareth made a great point. He says the great thing is you have the biggest, most comprehensive course in the world available for free called YouTube. So yeah, I wish I had YouTube when I was learning how to play bass as a kid. So we used to have to call radio stations or request songs so we could tape them so we could learn them. So old school, low technology days. Okay, so I just see in line with the current question, how do I change the tempo midway? Example, I have a track that's in 4/4, then has a 1/4 drop at one stage. After that, continues in 4/4 again. Okay, so let's say if I'm in this project, I think this is in 6/8. So, and also for Tanmei's benefit, this is a song here. This song is in 6/8. So let's see if if we listen to it. And I'll just turn on my click track. So this is very much like a 6/8 song. So you can just count to 6. All right, but let's say to answer the current question, if we wanted to switch our time signatures from 4/4 to 4/1/4, so all you have to do is we could add a track and you'll see a signature track. So right now we're in 6/8. So I can say at this point, measure 67 or measure 65. I want this to jump to 4/4, and I need this to go to, let's say, 1/4, and then back to 4/4, and then let's say 6/8. So now as we listen to our will be in 6/8, and then it's going to switch to 4/4. However, 1/4, 4/4, and then back to 6/8. So that's how you could do to insert different time signature changes within your project. It's a great description from Gareth. If you could dance to it in a suit, it's 3/4, 6/8. So. So you just see, it says, just a quick comment. My Cubase was rock solid for years, but lately it's been crashing, just disappears from screen. Only change been updates to Windows. So sometimes Windows, can, as it doesn't update, it'll update different drivers for different components, but it can't hurt to just, periodically reinstall your eLicenser driver as well. Okay, so we see, please could you tell if I can open my Cubase project made Windows on Cubase Mac? So, the Cubase projects are cross-platform, so there's no problem opening up. Most of the projects that we see here that I'm using were done on Windows, and we're seeing it in Mac, so it's the Cubase project file format. It doesn't really care which operating system is being used, as long as it's open in Cubase, you're all set. Okay, reading through comments again. Thanks for all the great discussion. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Hopefully I didn't lose any questions. Okay, so I may have lost a couple questions. So again, if I missed your question, I apologize, and feel free to ask it again. Hopefully I didn't lose a lot. Okay, so I see a comment from Jeff Sabelski wondering if the MIDI tracks were automatically named from the instrument. So if you want the MIDI tracks to be named from an instrument, I think if we come over to, let's say if I go to my VST instruments here, and let's say if I go to Retrolog and I drag over a Retrolog preset, that at that point it's going to name the track based upon the preset that was dragged over. So if I say tidal waves and I drag tidal waves over, at that point the track will be created and the MIDI information will carry the name over. So depending on how you instantiate the preset. Okay. Okay, so we have just a question: splitting MIDI drums to own track. Explanation, please. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to do that. Okay, so if we wanted to take our MIDI drums and split them based on where each track can be on its own. So let's say I have this pattern here. So a lot of times, I see people that may do that, but when you actually, I think if you used a drum editor, you might not have to split it. But if you wanted to split all these drums into individual tracks, all you have to do is select the event, go to your MIDI menu, and you'll see dissolve part. Let me just make sure I have. So you'll see dissolve part, and you can say separate by pitches. And then you'll have like the kick, hi-hat, snare, all kind of broken down into individual tracks. Okay, just reading through comments. So you see JVI is maybe going to help his daughter with homework. So I'll be doing that later tonight. Okay, so I just see I'm having an issue with sampler tracks losing their samples. What happens is if I use backup feature to move song to another drive, when I go to open song again to new drive, it lost the sample. So the sample isn't, going to necessarily, the sample could be independent. And if you move it, well, the one thing you can do if you work with sampler tracks, it's always a good thing to do, just to make sure that the sample travels with the project. If we create a sampler track here, is just to save it as a track preset. So when you save as a track preset, you could just give it a name. And at this point, I think you spelled your username wrong. But when you go to, your sampler track under your MediaBay, that way it's made that connection for you. So let's say if we go to track preset, sampler, and at this point I could just drag that over, but try just to save it right here as a preset name. And then when you go to load up the sampler track, I think it'll be retained. So that's always a good thing to do. And that way you could use that same sampler track in other projects. And I see in your further comment, but I'll make sure to kind of pass that along to development team. Okay, we have a question. Hi, how are you recording into Cubase and showing the screen? I tried OBS, but it's not working. So I'm using OBS to do this. So I'll show you kind of my OBS setup. So I just have the computer display, and I use one audio interface for Cubase and one audio interface for OBS just to kind of split the tasks. So the interface I'm using is a UR24C for Cubase. For OBS, I have a Yamaha mixer where I take the analog outputs of the UR24C, combine it with my microphone, and that goes into my Yamaha mixer that has a USB out, and I use the Yamaha USB mixer output for the audio for OBS, and that's what everyone hears. So if I have to cough or do something, I could do that as well. See, John Costigan's mentioning, since Agent K is in here, we can get away with saying kind and considerate things about him and that he'll never know about it. So it's a good point. Okay, question from JVI. In my studio devices MIDI port setup, some of my MIDI outs are inactive. If I click on them, I can't change it. Why is that? Because I could use that. So when we go to your studio setup and we see that we have, you go to your MIDI port setup, that these are inactive just because they're not being used. So as soon as they are, so we can't really change the status, but as soon as let's say if I want to go to my auxiliary out, this is inactive. So I'm going to add a MIDI track. And in the MIDI track, I will set this to the panorama for aux out. So now that's being used in the project. When we go to our studio setup, then it becomes active. So as soon as it's being used, that's what the status is indicating, that it is being used. So don't feel bad if you see it inactive. It just means it's not being used in the project. Once it's being used in the project, it will then it will indicate that it is active. Okay, reading through. So just saying so about the licensing, just as I was hoping that they're moving licensing to iLok. Most of us have to have one of those there anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with iLok technology. So, and we're trying to get away from utilizing, Steinberg has announced that in the future there will be kind of a dongle-less solution, and there's a lot of issues with iLok for people and for security for companies. So all right, wonderful to see Sable Winters has made the live stream. And once again, since Friday's live stream will be the last of the month, we will be doing our Zoom meetup. So feel free to, I saw a couple emails come in. So if you want to send me an email, I could send you the link for the Zoom meetup, or I will post it on during the live stream on Friday. So we have a question from Gdansk, Poland. I'm getting ready to buy Nuendo. Does Nuendo include exactly all the same features as Cubase plus additional Nuendo specific features? Basically, yes. It used to be that there were differences between them. So the one thing that Nuendo doesn't have that Cubase has is VST Transit. But that's really about the only feature that's not going to be in Nuendo. So they're basically at parity, and then Nuendo will offer more capabilities, and additional functionality. But you're not, besides VST Transit, you're not going to really, lose any particular features. just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions and discussions. All right, so you see producer Roderick loves the tools of Cubase with a capital V. Someone else added. Okay, a lot of great discussion going on, just going through it all, hoping I'm not missing too many questions. I know we lost some questions during my chat field disappearing. So we have a question. Does anyone know what could trigger Cubase at the starting splash screen to scan the content every time it's starting? Happens only on Windows 10 PC, freshly built. Time and date are correct. So, it will usually scan the content just to make sure stuff is there, so that if you have projects that, it's giving you an indication that content is installed. So sometimes you may find, like when you're first starting, that like when I rebuilt my PC maybe about 18 months ago, that as I was loading a lot of new instruments, that sometimes it took a while for the MediaBay to find all the content. So as it was starting, it was kind of slow because it may not have done a complete scan. So you may see it just kind of disappear over time. Okay. Okay, so we're just kind of reading through with lots of great discussion and comments today. Okay, so you see in the score editor under the project tab, there are chord diagrams, but not working when I set it for creating diagrams when make chords. Yeah, so it didn't seem like it did that for me either, but I could, let me just see what happens if I go and try just manually putting it in to see what it does. But I could play around with that particular. I'm sure it's user error on my part, but I thought that there was a quick preference to be able to toggle whether, like when you do make chords, that was different than that one. So let me just revert this. So I think once you maybe have that done, you could just come and, put in like, the chords like this. So you could just go to and let me see with this particular tool here if I okay, so it looks like so if I'm here, I'll zoom in. All right, so let's say if I come, I have this selected, this tool, and then kind of right click, I can say make chord symbol. Sorry. Just had it a minute ago, or we could just. All right, so let's say if I select all the chords here. All right, so I will. I'll just close some of these out here. Okay, so if I do this and then right click hit. Okay, so this is what you could do. All right, so got it sorted out. So if we have the guitar, if I hold down shift and double click, you could right click and say make guitar symbol. And then you could, reposition the chord symbol like that directly over the part. So you could kind of clean that up. So once again, just you could do it for one particular chord or just come right here. So shift double click, that will select all of the chords in your project, and then right click, make guitar chord symbol, and then you could have and then you could clean it up. But that's how you could kind of self-populate the guitar chord diagrams directly in there. Okay, so just see tempo detection is terrible in Cubase. What am I doing wrong? So if you find that you have a project that's not cooperating with tempo detection, there are little things that you can do. So I'll revert this quickly here. Okay, so let's say if I have my project here, so I'll do a quick tempo detection. So you do have, different interpretive things here. So, you could say, okay, if it was determine it, like we're in more triplets, so you could multiply by 4/3 or multiply by 3/4 or, multiply by 2 or offbeat correction. So if you come, let's say like there, I need to do offbeat correction. And if you find, now it takes you into a very quick way of just saying, okay, when we do this, that we're going to have the time warp tool. So if you need to make a change and say, okay, measure 129, this was interpreted wrong, it needs to be right here instead. And at that point, it will do an analysis. If you have this kind of turned on, it will automatically detect from that point onward, and that could help refine the search. So some people, will do a track and they're like, oh, it's all these tempo variations going on, and it's a steady track, but a lot of times it wasn't a steady track. And what makes a track groove is the little tempo fluctuations within the bar. So, many times, people look at this and say, oh, it doesn't do a good job, but, it's often very accurate. It's, sometimes hyper accurate with it. So try some of those things with the tempo detection. Okay, John Costigan says we need to feed me by stimulating the like button, and that I'm getting sick of eating Alpo. So I'm not that bad at cook. Anyway. Okay, so we have a question. Could you please show us how to properly prepare a project backup for future access with all the VST and processing intact? So if you wanted to back up like all of the files, all you had to do is go to your file menu and choose backup project. You will choose a new folder. And at this point, you could get prompted where you want to keep the current project active. You could minimize audio files. So if you use only 10 seconds of a 30-second recording, you can, if you minimize the audio files, that will automatically get rid of the unused 20 seconds of the recording. You can make the direct offline processing permanent. You could remove unused files. You could choose not to back up video or the mixdown folder. Give it a name, and that will automatically do the backup for you. See, Michael Pierce is going to miss this week's Zoom, and he's sad. So we could catch you in June. So we'll miss you, though. Okay, reading through. Okay, so a question. How can I have a time offset? My project already have 4 bars offset. I would like to align bar 1 with 0 seconds. I did not do very well with the project setup. Okay, so let's say I may have a quick project. Let me see if I actually... I have a quick project here. Show some offsets. Okay, so let's okay, I'm going to import a video file here. Okay, so we see bars and beats at top here, and this time I want it to be set to seconds. So I want measure 1 to be at 0 seconds. All right, and so it says you want to line bar 1. Okay, so if we go to our project setup, we could just choose. So if you have like 4 bars of offset, so let's say I do my display bar offset. At this point, measure 1 is going to start at 8 seconds, or yeah, so roughly 8 seconds. So that's where measure 1 starts. So try just going into your shift, your project setup, and that's Shift S. Set that to 0, and then hit OK. You could now move, hit yes to that, and now you'll see measure 1 be at 0. So one question I often get is, I have my video and it's at this time code, maybe like an hour in. Okay, yeah. So let's say I have this video in, and this video starts at 1 hour in or 30 minutes in, and I want measure 1 to be here. So at 1 hour. So this is a question I get. So if you wanted to be able to do this, if we go to the project setup, I will take a look at my time code here. So let's say, okay, I have bars and beats and time code. So it's measure 1801 is at 1 hour at 120 beats a minute. So if I go to my Shift S, we could choose our project start time as being 1 hour. And we'll say you modify time code. You want to keep the project time at its current time code position. So we want it to be at 1 hour, but we want measure 1 to be there. So we'll say yes. And now as we look at it, we're at 1 hour time code wise, but we'll see actual measure 1. So we look at our bars and beats. That's measure 1 starting at 1 hour. And at this point, if I wanted to do like a 2-bar offset, I could hit OK. We could keep those positions. So we've added 2 negative bars. Measure 1 is still going to be starting, at the beginning of, at 1 hour. So try those things. I know it could be a little confusing at first. Once you get the hang of it, should be all set. So a question from Jeff Zabelski. Greg, have you personally witnessed anyone using a breath controller with cool results? I haven't seen a breath controller in use in a long time. The first time I saw it, I saw really cool results. It was my friend Butch Taylor, who was kind of in our college band circuit, and he used to play with Carter Beaufort, who's the drummer in Dave Matthews Band. He used to play in a band called Secrets with Gunnar Mossblad on sax, John Dirth on trumpet, Butch on keyboards. I forget the bass player's name. It's escaping me. And Carter on drums. So, and a lot of the guys went on to be in Dave Matthews Band. So, like some of those guys, and it was... I'm trying, the guitar player that does a lot of stuff with Dave Matthews. So, but I remember him doing DX7 to FD at a gig, and him using the breath controller and kind of trading solos with Gunnar Mossblad on sax. And he did a really good job with that. And it was very expressive. So that kind of stands out to me. I haven't seen a lot of people use it for studio stuff, but I always remember, watching those guys and Butch, who's a wonderful musician. He was like the touring keyboard player with Dave Matthews for years. So, but I think he's still in Charlottesville gigging and doing stuff. So, but a wonderful musician. So, and we see Grant Nicholas, who's a trumpet player, and so he says he uses a breath controller. It's wonderful to see Grant on the live stream. So we see that other people like Gareth using Shift X for calming particular notes here and there. And we see Jeff's also uses it for popping out notes in a phrase. Okay, so we see a question from Danielle. I want to upgrade Cubase 11. There are no problems to open Cubase 10 projects. Yeah, no problems at all. They'll just open right up. So no problem with that. Okay, so we just see when can we edit CC on multiple tracks. So, there have been some improvements with that. So, we can't necessarily. So, there are some tricks that you could do. So, let's say if I'm here and let's add a MIDI track or two. So, now you're going to be able to, let's just grab some modulation data here. So when we look at it, we could say, okay, I want to go to MIDI 2 and now to MIDI 3. Okay, so it used to be that, it was a bit nightmarish to copy your MIDI CC data across tracks, and I think it's kind of like maybe it's like a software architectural thing, but now at least you could copy and use the key command to come here and let's paste at origin, and you could just copy and paste between them. But a lot of people will also just come over here and just assign their CC and choose to record the CC data directly for all 3 tracks. So you could do that as well. So if you just come right over here, say, okay, now I just want to record that CC, that you could do that across multiple tracks simultaneously. But I'll make sure to kind of mention that another time. Okay, so I just see from Danielle, and what about the M1 CPU to Intel? So there's no problems migrating projects between M1 processors to Intel. So we see greetings. Could you please explain A sharp versus B flat and the way it gets displayed in chord track compared to chord assistant? Best regards, true neophyte in music reading. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to put in a chord track here. So there I could just put it in as B flat. So and I guess you could probably just, so I know it might show A sharp major for the scale, and so I know that the scale could be different. I'll make sure to pass that along of why it's A sharp in the scale, but the chord can show up as B flat. So I don't think there's a good reason for that, unfortunately, but I'll make sure to email the developer on that. Okay, hi Greg. Thanks a lot for these moments. I have probably a dumb question. Is it possible to audio warp/free warp multiple tracks in a folder or a workaround, mostly for fixing bad time drums? So, you could do kind of the multi-track drum quantizing. So if you wanted to, let's go to this project here. Okay, so if I wanted to, it's not where you could just say, oh, this one part was kind of bad, but if you wanted to quantize the drums, and this is more of a, more of a drum quantizing mentality, but if I just wanted to go to the hit points, and I want to find kind of the rhythmically significant hit points for files here. And let's say these drums aren't quite aligned. We could turn on to group editing. And then as we go to our quantize panel, here we could set priority for the different drum parts. And we could choose to slice the audio. So, at this point you could just, but if you don't want to slice, we could create slices, but you could also just at this point, I'll go back one level here. So we could just put this into audio warp mode and say, okay, I want this to be set to 16th notes. And then kind of quantize like that. So for, but it's where if you wanted to do like guitars and drums and bass, it's not good for that. But for cleaning up drum performances, you could do that. There we see Danielle's iMac 2011 died. Sorry to hear that. It's a bummer. My studio PC motherboard just kind of went out on me too, so I know how much that sucks. So I hope you enjoy your new computer. All right, so we see Bayan Abu Chakra says, I just bought Nuendo a week ago, moving from Slow Tools. That's great. Welcome to the live stream. right, so you see people mentioning just going back to old Atari days with their Cubase. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, I don't think I lost any questions this time. Okay, so, we see more kind of discussion on tempo track of why, such massive variation using tempo detection materials recorded with a locked tempo. So again, a lot of times stuff is going to fluctuate. I went through this with, an artist, very famous artist who's, incredibly notorious for their tempo, and he insisted that it wasn't, and, everything he was doing was perfectly in time. And when you do an analysis of it, it isn't. So, those little tempo fluctuations, some people call them groove. Okay, so we see a follow-up question on mixing in Dolby 5.1. Does Cubase 11 or Nuendo 11 provide the encoder, or do I need a third-party plugin? So the encoder is not a part of Cubase or Nuendo. So you'd have to get it from another source. We used to provide a Dolby Digital and DTS encoder, and no one bought them. So. Okay, so question, I am new to Nuendo. The only thing I couldn't figure out is why I can't hear the audio from MediaBay. Everything seems correct. So this may seem counterintuitive, especially as a new user, but go to your audio connections and make sure you go to activate control room, and where you would set your output monitors, try to have your stereo out, set it to not connected. Go to your control room, activate your monitors so you can add a monitor and connect through there and assign that to where it's going out to your monitoring system, and then you should be able to hear the control room. Okay, a question. Hi, Greg. How can I insert plugins post fader? So if you okay, so if you go to the inserts here, so do you see this green line? This is pre and post fader. So, and this green line is movable. So if it's above the green line, we could think of this as being pre-fader. And then if it's below the green line, that would be post-fader. So, and once again, that line is movable on every single track, can be set independently as needed for your mix. So orange is post, green is pre. All right, so seeing more discussion on authoring for surround sound. So it's not an easy thing to do. So. Okay, so we're just seeing a lot of discussion on the tempo detection. It says, and says I have the audio recording mixes I did years ago. I can't separate the individual parts, but it has locked drum tempo. So even original drum machines varied a lot in tempo. While we think they're perfect, if you actually do analysis of many drum machines that you think are perfect, they're not. So, that's a big reason why you may see tempo variations. But, also you can simply, do what we did a little earlier, and then you could tweak the tempo as well. Okay, we have a question. Greg, could you explain the slot in Inspector on MIDI track? What is retrospective recording? All right, so I'll come over here. Let's do just a quick new project. All right, so one of the age-old dilemmas is people always compose and play the most amazing parts when they're not recording. So you're just kind of here, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, why, like an idiot, I wasn't recording. So if you hit retrospective recording, at this point, I could just insert that recording, and it's as if, because it actually captured all that information in the buffer. If we had this in a loop, we could choose to, put it into like cycle recording loop as well. And we also see this little button here. So anytime that you actually are, you're just like, okay, I'm just here and I just want it. Like, oh, it's so perfect. Just come right over here, click on retrospective record, and then it's just going to automatically place whatever you just kind of noodled with or whatever you performed in your MIDI keyboard. It's going to automatically place that directly onto your project window. So it's kind of always recording MIDI data in the background, and you could do that for the, you could record up to a minute of audio in the background if you wanted to as well. Okay, so you just see, thanks for clearing that up, Greg. Are we getting Cubase 11.5 in November? So I'm sure that there's people in Hamburg that are working on things. So. Okay, thanks for all the great comments. All right, let's see. Going through more questions. All right. Okay, so it says, sorry, I think my question got lost or missed it. Yeah, I did lose a couple, like 2 sets of questions. So thanks, John, for re-asking it. How do I map an external drum library, something through rack instruments in my drum editor? So if you wanted to create, if it's an external instrument or if it's like a third-party instrument, all you'd have to do if you wanted to create a drum map is where we see no drum map. Click on drum map setup, and then you could just double click, and at this point you could just name whatever sound a drum map is. You could remap the out notes. You could change for notation display, you could come over here and change the note head shape. And then all you have to do is under functions, you could save that drum map. And if you save that drum map as part of a track preset, if you call it up for an external instrument, you could have that track preset and call it up and have the drum map. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. Okay. Just reading. So I just see a comment. I like how the track clips looked in version 9 and 10. I like the 3D effect. I don't know why they took that out. So I'm not sure if it's just kind of the events. I think like from 10, they've been the same. So. Okay, so we have Norton, from Augusta, I assume it's Augusta, Georgia. Possible help on earlier question on deleting HALion tracks after MIDI song imports. Couldn't remove tracks directly and had to select no instrument on rack. Yeah, so if you don't want that behavior, what you could do is go to your preferences and on MIDI to MIDI file, you could choose to, it'll just put it to HALion Sonic SE multi-timbral, but you could just have it go to MIDI or instrument tracks. And once it imports the file, you could just see that it'll load up as HALion Sonic SE. And at that point, just, select no VST instrument and that will get rid of it. Okay, so we have a question. Is there an auto color for Groove Agent pads? So let's take a look. So I don't think that there's a preference for it, but I think that you could just set color for multiple pads. So I know some kits will have different instruments colorized, especially in the patterns, but you would have to kind of come over here. And for a lot of people, that could be very particular with their colors. So if you want it to just come over here, right click and set colors accordingly. So you could do it like that pretty easily, but there isn't kind of I don't think that there's a automatically increment colors, but let's take a look just to make sure. Yeah, I don't see one here for that. So we see a great comment from Jazz Dude on kind of the state of developing software. Imagine now Steinberg develops 11.5 with Win 10, 20H2. Now MS comes out with 21H1 last 2 weeks. Now Steinberg has to adopt. It's a never-ending problem with Microsoft. Yes, and definitely in Apple too. So yeah, it's always challenging, but it's a little better than it was in the previous days, especially in Mac OS, where everyone had different extensions and, one extension could take down your whole system. So. So I see a question from Robbie Bowling. Wasn't there once an automatic backup? So I don't think that Cubase has ever had an automatic backup because it could, potentially be a problem if it's backing up your hard, if it's backing up audio files while recording audio files in some people's hard drives. So I think most people wouldn't want it to do an auto backup because it could compromise like audio recordings. So I don't know of one, but there's always the backup project solution. So. Okay, so just see question: is there a way to insert post, plugins post fader? So all you have to do is any plugin that you insert. So let's say if I just put in a brick wall limiter here, I think that we could move. You could just, if you put it into the wrong one, you could just right click and move it to a post fader slot. So. But being that every single track can have different numbers of pre and post faders and they're independent for the tracks, I don't think there's you could, wherever you kind of drag and drop it to, and even if we have like this file open and let's say I'm there and I go to my, let's say I jump home to media to my VST effects, it's wherever I drag this particular, we could see it if I drag it to post fader or drag it to pre fader. You could also do that as well. Okay, just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great discussions. I know we had some people that emailed some questions in. We'll get to those in just a minute. All right, so I just see Jeff Sabelski says, maybe an oboist like me can get some cool sound and feel with the breath controller. Thanks for his comments. So, yeah, you could definitely, as a player, I think you could benefit from it. There's a lot of people, and it's, like I had a girl just sent me, like an orchestral thing that she did on Facebook. And I was just like, and she did a really nice job. And I think she's in college and she sent it to me for feedback. But I was just like, at some point you have to write so that the trumpet player can take a breath. And I was like, just imagine, I'm like, as you play the melody, breathe the melody like you're singing it. And at some point you have to take a breath and you have to, allow the trumpet player, the wind player, the oboist to take a breath and think about those little types of things. If you're a drummer, try to only have 4 sounds at once because you have 4 limbs. So those little things can make a big difference in a large project. All right, so it says with the project playing, when I arm an audio track, the audio stops and resumes just like you when you add a new track. So it's good. Give it a shot. So it could be if you have, what plugins are on that track, but let's just say I have a couple audio tracks here. Okay, so let's say I'm playing. And let me just drag over a drum loop so we can hear if there's any interruptions. Okay, so let's say, all right, so let's say I'm recording here. And I start recording there, stop recording here. So it could be that when you're recording on these tracks, if you have plugins that are causing a lot of latency, that could be causing kind of the audio hiccups that you're describing. So you may want to see, if you're able to, if you hit the constrained delay compensation here in the bottom left-hand corner of the transport and see if that makes a difference for you. But as you can see, we didn't have any audio interruptions, just kind of switching between arming different tracks while recording. So it could be that, there's a plugin that has to then compensate for the delay. And if you enable the constrained delay compensation, that could resolve that for you. Okay, we have a question from Jan. When I create a chord track from MIDI, I also get numbers in the chord line. What is this for? So let's just take a look. Okay, so I'll take this part and let's go to project, to chord track, and let's create chord symbols. Okay, so it says in a chord track, so when I create a chord track from MIDI, I get also numbers in the chord line. What is this numbers for? So I assume it's not like the sus4 or the 7th chord, but I don't see any of the numbers here. Let me just in the chord line. So I don't see any of the numbers. If yours looks different than mine, Jan, if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. If I could see it, maybe I could figure out what it is for you. So let's see, I just see a comment from Graham. I still can't believe that with all the thousands of Cubase users around the world, we only get 100 or so on this forum. Can there be more publicity about this in the Steinberg shop for new users? So, they do post it on social media, but we do, usually average, a pretty good amount of users. So I think I'd done some calculations just for my yearly reports. And as of at the end of March, we were at, 750,000 views for the year since we kind of redid the, since we started in pandemic time. So while, there's maybe not tons of people watching live depending on their time zone, but, you'll see thousands of views for each of these. So, but, also just, spread it to your friends and other people as well. So to see, Greg, any experience to compare Nuage to Avid Yukon surfaces? Nothing to bash Yamaha. Is the control surface flexibility comparable? So I think the Yamaha is going to be the most comprehensive integration of any control surface that I've ever seen. I think the avid Yukon, and I was there during early Yukon, when Yukon was birthed. And it like little stuff like, doesn't do MIDI, there's still, and all of the people that had done, I don't think that there's any of the engineering team that developed Yukon that are still involved with it for the last 5-6 years. But just general impressions, is I think that you would find that the Nuage control surface, like some surfaces, I find control surfaces fall into two categories. One that's a mixing surface and one that's an editing surface. So one, they usually fall into those two categories. And I think that the Nuage is a beautiful integration of both of those concepts. If you come from Fairlights, where you're kind of, muscle memory, I'm reaching out for stuff and I'm working fast, Nuage is a really wonderful solution for that. And I think it's really obvious, like, you see where the solo button is, what the mute color of the button is just by kind of doing it, and the feel of the faders and kind of the build quality, I think is really pretty stellar on the Nuage. So, I think the Nuage experience is going to be, far superior than any Yukon surface. Okay. Okay, so we see when I use channel presets, Cubase mutes the channels. When I try to do previews, forcing me to exit dialog box and turn on monitor again. Very tedious process. So let's say if I was doing, let me just see if we jump back to like this project. So let's say if I wanted to do, so I'm not sure how you're doing the track presets, but let's say if I'm like, if I want to do track presets for drums and I'm here, if I go to my MediaBay and let's go to presets, track presets, audio, and let's look for drums. So if I just kind of drag these over, so say if I just kind of, you could just audition track presets. So I'm not sure if that's how you're doing it, but it's not really changing any of the capabilities or interrupting kind of the workflow, and it's not muting the channel or forcing you to do the exit dialog box. So maybe try dragging from the MediaBay, and I think that may see if that works better for you. All right, so just see comment, why not put it in the feed to Cubase when we load it each day? We'd see announcements about it. So if you subscribe to any of the Steinberg social media stuff, I know sometimes they could be different things that, every time there's a new tutorial or new video that may get annoying to see in the USB hub, but I'll let kind of the home team know about that. Okay, we have a question. Hi, how to make permanent visible track window above for chord track, for example. All right, so we could pin different tracks to the top. So let's say if I'm here and I have the chord track, you have a divide track list. So I could now move this and you could activate this. You see this little tiny icon here. It's incredibly subtle. So if you go to this icon, you can turn it on here, and now you have your divide track list. So if you want to have particular tracks at the top, you could scroll through and not see, and those will be fixed at the top. So you want to see tempo or other things. All right, so I'm going to get to some of the emailed in questions. Thanks for all the great questions that we see here. Okay, so we have a question. Why is that in render in place I don't see hide source track checkmark and only see 2 options, source track menu, instead of the 4 that you have in your videos? Okay, so let me just jump back to one of my other projects here. So the render in place can offer different options depending on if a event is selected or a track is selected. So if I just wanted to come to a particular track and do a render in place. So if I have the event selected and I go to my render in place options. So I go to my render settings. When we see our source events, we have 2 options there. But if I choose to select the event, or the track rather, as opposed to the event. So now when we go to our source settings, we could choose to go to our render settings, and now we could choose to mute the source tracks or delete the source tracks. So if I just wanted to, or remove the source tracks, I could take this, this event right here. I'll choose to render. And then as we do that, it's going to automatically just turn that right into an audio file, remove the MIDI data, and have that automatically be rendered for you. All right, so JVI had asked kind of a follow-up from a previous question about, or from last live stream on Friday, I believe, about setting up if there's a way to generate MIDI sustain pedal for a 16th note after the measure and ending a 16th note before the bar. And I was playing with the logical editor and I didn't kind of figure out a way to do that effectively. So I think, probably the best thing to do that quickly might be to, let's say if we have our sustain pedal here. So I will just select my sustain pedal information. So if I wanted to put this in like every measure, starting a 16th note in, so I will just activate my snap. And I'll say, okay, we want it to be 16th note here. And let's go ahead and just all right, so let's say if I wanted that pattern to be repeated. So I didn't find a way to kind of automatically, have that generated from a logical editor. But if I just select those 2 points, if I have that one pattern created, I could just hit Control or Command D and just have that pattern throughout each of the measures. So that could kind of speed up the whole process. But I wasn't able to figure out a logical editor preset to do that. I'll keep playing with it and see if I come up with anything. All right. So, and we had discussion about also the synchronization between machine and Cubase for on a loop. So there's discussion about this that we talked about last time, and I showed that other VST instruments like Groove Agent don't have any issues with that. So, in doing more research on that, it seems like, many people in other programs are kind of having the same issues regardless of host. So, and generally with timing, all that stuff is really, a lot of stuff with, that I've seen with native instruments, especially with tempo changes on some of their instruments, has a lot of issues. It's kind of a commonly known issue. So I think it's really I'll show the video to our side, but I think it's really going to be a native instruments issue. And it could be that it's, how they've coded it for VST versus some other plugin formats. Okay, so last time we had a question on taking a plugin snapshot. So if we have a plugin being used in a particular track, so let's say if I add I'll activate this. So let's say if I add an instrument track, and I think we did I think I had one third-party plugin like a Towel synth. Okay, and I wanted to add this screenshot. So the question is, where does this screenshot go? And if we wanted to use that as a track picture. So the location where it's going to go is, I'll just go to home here, and let's go to documents. And I think this would be the same on Windows, but let's go to Documents, to Steinberg, and then you'll see VST thumbnails. So now as soon as I wanted to click here, this would be the thumbnail that we just captured. So if we wanted to add that as a particular instrument track, if I wanted to add that as a picture, I could click here. Let's go to our user defined location. We could import, and at this point, just find that particular file. So let's say we will go to our Macintosh hard drive, to Documents, to Steinberg, to VST thumbnails. And now we could just have that thumbnail that was captured as part of the instrument picture right there. Okay, another question mailed in. My next request concerning possibility of disabling effects track after I print reverb assigned to one of several instruments. I'd like to disable the set of track and keep it together in respective folders to make it set and forget. Tried this disabling inability for effects tracks is an obstacle for me. Thank you for your work in terms of educating Cubase users. So if we have, let's say, our effect here and we've printed the reverb, so if the reverb has been printed, I think that it would be easy enough to just go to, the sends. And, so if you wanted to print the reverb on the track, you could go to your, render in place setup. And you could choose to render just the actual reverb, the tracks with the reverb. But if the reverb has been exported, you could just, if you want to free up resources but still have it in case you need to tweak it, is just, turning off the reverb. So that way you could just, turn that off. And depending on your plugin, if it's a VST3 plugin, you could, if it's not being used, you could suspend the plugin processing, so it's not taking up the power of the computer, of the processing, as soon as it's not passing audio. So that way it's not going to take up CPU cycles for you. Okay. So we had a question: is it possible to glue MIDI modulation and expression data to notes within MIDI tracks so that they remain aligned to events even after the notes are moved? For example, after randomizing the notes for humanization. The result of the question is because it's easier to copy and paste MIDI performance data to multiple quantized tracks and then humanize the tracks through MIDI note randomization. So I think what this is kind of getting at is if we have MIDI data here, and let's say if I have volume data and I wanted to look at modulation, and so now when I move the MIDI notes here, there's this little icon where it's auto select controllers. So if I'm reading this right, I could just take this, select the notes, and I'll just do this on a larger screen so it's more obvious. And now when I select these notes, I can move those notes, we'll enlarge the part, and then the controllers can move with them. And if we wanted to just copy, I could just hold down the Alt or Option key, and as we copy, we could choose to enlarge the part. That MIDI CC data that was, in the same time as the MIDI notes will get copied and pasted right over with it. Okay, so let's jump back to our live questions. I see more kind of discussion about the problems with the plugins when switching, that there's a little gap. One thing to check also, we saw when I did a recording, but make sure you don't have any plugins on in the control room. If you have plugins in the control room, that could also cause latency too. All right, read through some more comments. I just see a comment from Graham. I suppose if there were 1,000 in this club every session, then Greg would not be able to cope. So, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. We try to stop at 4 hours just because it's, for a lot of people, English isn't their main language, and I'm horrible at other languages. So, and at 4 hours, it will stop kind of the closed captioning, which can be translated for other languages. All right, I know we're close to being at time, so let me just see. My chat field just jumped on me. All right, see if we get one more question in before we wrap up. I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions. All right, just reading through comments. Okay. So I just see Jazz Dude saying he just checked Yamaha Corporation's stock market value. They're at all-time high. So Greg hopefully gets a promotion in Cubase, and Steinberg's in good hands. So yeah, so we'll see. I'm not sure anyone in Yamaha in Japan really knows me. So, but thanks for the kind words. So I bet they take care of me. They make lots of good stuff. Okay, quick question. Hi, Greg. I transposed a song 2 semitones down and then sang it. When I put it back 2 semitones up, the vocal is out of tune completely. Is there a way around this? So, yeah, I mean, the vocal you sang was out of tune. So what you could do is just select the vocal and you see transpose and just go up 2. All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up because we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Make sure that you let your friends know about these live streams, and you can post on social media, let other people know. But I look forward to seeing many of you on the Zoom. So again, on Friday's Hangout, we'll do 2 hours and then another 2 hours of a Zoom get-together. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on Friday. Thanks.